So you're here because you want to see EMDR in action, and I'm here to give you the goods. Not only am I going to show you EMDR, but I'm also going to walk you through it and explain step by step what actually is happening. So the next question is, who am I doing EMDR on? Bam! Myself. So back in November, I went to a training seminar to learn EMDR, and I was able to film myself getting EMDR done on me. So what I want to do is not only give you a therapist's perspective on EMDR, but also the inside scoop and the personal perspective of what it actually feels like to get EMDR done on you. There's a lot going on, so unless you're familiar with EMDR, it won't make complete sense to you. So I'm going to come along for the ride with you and do kind of a live reaction and try my best to explain what's happening play by play so it all makes sense. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
So when we were just talking about that, there's more around this little boy. Remind me what the negative belief is we're working with?
Inadequacy.
Inadequacy. I'm inadequate.
Yes, I'm inadequate.
All right. So when you kind of check in with what was coming up, we're talking like there's some more layers here.
Yeah.
What are you noticing?
So EMDR is much more than the Jedi mind trick you're about to see here soon. There's actually 8 stages to EMDR, and we're currently at stage 4. This is the stage where we're actually processing our trauma, and it kind of represents what a lot of us think EMDR actually looks like. So what are we doing here? We're starting to get the emotional juices flowing, and we're trying to get to the core of my trauma. You saw that she just asked me, what's the negative belief? So this is a very important component needed to process your trauma. At the core of all of our trauma is a shame-based negative belief. So let's break this down. What is shame? Shame is an unwanted identity that we don't want to feel about ourselves. If you think back to your most traumatic memories, it made you feel a certain type of way about yourself. If your parents neglected you, you may have felt like you were unlovable. If you went through a divorce or a breakup, you may have felt like you're not good enough. If you were bullied, you may have felt like I'm weak or I'm a pussy or I'm a bitch. If you were sexually assaulted, you may have felt like I'm going to die. The list of these shame-based traumatic identities goes on and on and on. I'm not important, I'm powerless, I'm unworthy, I'm a disappointment, are some of the most common ones to name a few. For me personally, my negative belief was I'm inadequate. And that's what we're starting to hone in on during this part of EMDR.
What are you noticing?
When I was in kindergarten and wasn't able to articulate and answer the question correctly, I remember putting my head down because we were all sitting down on the floor and like everyone, all the kids kind of like moving on and just being by myself there. That's what came up, just a lone little boy sitting there.
So in other words, I'm alone or I'm inadequate? Which one seemed more connected to that?
I'm alone.
Okay.
So with EMDR, we're addressing the sources of our trauma through our traumatic memories. My therapist is asking me to recall the memory we're going to be processing. Again, this starts to get the traumatic juices flowing. As we start to dig deeper into this memory, we see a new traumatic theme start to surface. Before, I believed the trauma was solely due to inadequacy, but there's a stronger theme of I am alone that's starting to present itself as the trauma in this memory. Which one's stronger isn't really necessarily important because we can focus on addressing both of them. But what is important is that we're already gaining some perspective on my trauma. There's a link between my fear of inadequacy and how it leads to me being alone. This is what we call insight. Let's continue watching.
It's okay to check out this kindergarten thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you bring up that kindergarten event, what's the worst part as you think about it now or you notice it now? Is there an image or what represents the worst part?
Just a kid being there without anyone to support me. Okay, so you notice that she asked me, what's the worst part? So we've already covered component number 1, the negative belief or the negative theme at the core of our trauma. Now we're covering component number 2, the worst part. Asking what's the worst part of the memory is important because it helps us to anchor down to the bedrock of our trauma. Its purpose is to bring a vivid image into our mind's eye and answer the question, why was this memory so traumatic for me? It helps us conjure up and lock in a clearer image of the trauma connected to the memory we're processing. For me, the trauma is related to seeing myself as a kid alone, unsupported, and unloved. Let's keep watching.
So that kid sitting there all alone, feeling unsupported.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And when you notice the positive side of that, what would you prefer to believe? When you think back to that, what would you prefer to believe?
What would I prefer to believe? You're supported.
Okay. I'm supported.
You're loved. You're cared for.
Okay. So you're lovable. You're worthy of support.
Yes. Cared for. Yes.
And when you
So now we're on to component 3 of EMDR, replacing the negative belief with a positive belief. So as of right now, when I think about this traumatic memory, the current theme of this memory is steeped in the trauma of inadequacy and loneliness. Part of the magic of EMDR is taking a traumatic memory and helping us change our perspective on that memory. We call this integration. So instead of me looking back on this memory and feeling inadequate and lonely, she's asking me, how would I rather want to feel about this situation? When I say I want to feel supported, loved, and cared for, what I'm saying is, despite experiencing the abandonment inherent in this memory, I still want to feel an internal sense of I'm supported, I'm loved, and I'm cared for, despite what has happened to me externally. The positive belief is important because when we're doing EMDR, we're linking the trauma that's trapped in the emotional, subcortical part of our brain and linking it to the more resilient, logical part of our brain in the prefrontal cortex. Essentially, with EMDR, we are rewiring our brain and making new connections. With EMDR, our brain will naturally lead us towards its own healing. We just have to have a new positive belief that makes sense in the scope of our trauma that gives our brain the direction to go when we're trying to process our trauma. So again, the positive belief is vitally important because it's what leads our brain in the direction needed to heal itself. I know all this sounds weird, but keep watching and it will make more sense soon.
I'm going to hand off now. Okay, so when you bring up those words, I'm alone, and the worst part of that kindergarten event, notice that and follow my fingers.
So, you can't tell it, but I'm emotionally primed and ready to go. I have the 4 main components I need to do EMDR: the traumatic memory, the negative belief, the worst part, and the positive belief. The juices are flowing, I'm emotionally primed, and we're ready to do EMDR. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Go ahead and take a deep breath. Let it out. What came up for you?
Him starting to get up.
Him starting to get up.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go with that. Him starting to get up.
So, I know what you're thinking. This shit looks weird. So let me explain what's going on. This weird Jedi mind trick you see is called bilateral stimulation. My eyes are watching her hand go back and forth while I'm also working through the traumatic memory in my head. This activates both sides of our brain and mimics how our brain processes the events of the day during REM sleep. In REM sleep, unbeknownst to us, our eyes are actually darting back and forth, and this helps us process the events of the day. We're tapping into the same process when we do EMDR. We do this for about 20 or 30 passes, and then she checks in with me and asks me, "What do you notice?" I don't know how to describe it, but for me personally, my trauma in this moment stemmed from abandonment, rejection when I was a kindergartner. And the worst part of the trauma was seeing my younger self so ashamed and alone. So anytime I thought about this memory, I was trapped in seeing this image of myself curled up in a ball with my head down. But after the first set of EMDR, I start to see my younger self starting to get up. Now let's see what happens next.
Yeah.
Boy, get emotional, baby. The emotions starting to come in.
What's happening there?
He dusted himself off.
Okay.
It's feeling better.
Dusted himself off and feeling better. It's feeling better. Yes.
Woo-wee! That boy's starting to get emotional. So here we start to see the beauty of EMDR. I had a traumatic memory of myself frozen in time. Previously, all I saw was this little version of me locked in a memory of shame and abandonment and rejection. But now with EMDR, I'm processing this trauma, and I'm literally starting to see in my mind's eye this little boy pick himself up, dust off that shame, that abandonment, and that rejection, and literally move past that frozen state of trauma that previously defined this memory. Woo! Isn't that shit just beautiful to watch? Let's keep watching.
Go ahead and breathe. Let it out. What came up for you there?
Just kind of walking away.
Walking away.
Moving on.
Keep that with you. Walking away.
Shit gets me kind of emotional right now. So there's something emotionally powerful about EMDR. I'm not going to front. This shit is intensely emotional. So let's break down what's happening here. Why is EMDR so intense? And why am I getting so emotional in this session? When you do EMDR, you are going back to the scene of the crime of your trauma. And you are literally unlocking that trauma and feeling the same feelings, thoughts, emotions, sensations you felt during that initial trauma. Again, you are feeling the same exact pain you felt during that initial trauma. So we can imagine how this can get intense if we're talking about processing something like a rape or a divorce, abandonment, or some type of emotionally intense trauma. We are going to the spot in your brain where that trauma is, and we're massaging that lump of trauma that's frozen in time. If you ever tried to massage a bruise, you know that shit hurts. But we're massaging an emotional bruise, and that's a very emotional experience. Let's keep watching.
And breathe.
The emotion's still coming out.
What's going on?
Deep breath in, baby. He's done. He's done with that moment. He's not looking back.
He's done with that moment. Okay. Now,
Woo-wee. And there you have it. The happy ending. EMDR usually starts out very intense and emotional as we're clearing out the emotional trauma related to our memory. But then eventually we get to what I like to call the happy ending. Your brain is starting to integrate the more positive, more resilient belief that you chose at the earlier stages of EMDR. Remember, mine was I'm loved, I'm supported, and I'm cared for. During EMDR, your brain does all the heavy lifting, and it will literally lead the way and develop a whole new perspective on how you see that previous traumatic memory. My brain's interpretation of being loved, supported, and cared for looked like me uncurling myself from that ball, me getting myself off, dusting myself off, and then me walking past the moment, leaving it behind. You see how I'm the solution to my own trauma. I'm no longer looking for external validation to define if I feel loved or supported. I don't need external validation anymore because I provide that for myself. EMDR shifts our solution from an external one where we're hoping to be saved by someone else or some force outside us to a more internalized based solution where we become our own savior. And the result of this is what I like to call integration. That trauma is no longer an experience that sticks out in my mind. It's been processed. So when I recall that memory, it's no longer a day of abandonment. It's like any other day of my childhood. It's no longer like a September 11th, a day that I can never forget. It's like September 8th or 9th or 10th. What I'm trying to say is that it's just a regular day. Let's keep watching.
I ask you, thinking of that little kindergarten boy, okay, and you feeling alone.
It doesn't bother me at all. I'm just amazed right now.
Sorry.
I feel like a release. I feel lighter.
Okay.
There we go. That's what I was after. Thank you.
There you go. That was a good one.
Yeah. So there you have it. My trauma has been cured and I can move on from this memory. I want to preface this by saying that there's a lot more that goes into EMDR, so don't try this shit at home. EMDR is in no way as smooth of an experience as this video conveys. I kind of edited around some things, so this video didn't include all the steps involved at this stage of EMDR, but it highlighted its core experience. If you want to learn more about EMDR and all of its different components, watch this video right here. It's all about me learning EMDR. So hopefully I can see you guys in that video. That's it.